the book is all about. But look, let me say what an honour it is to be invited to participate in this event. The West Papuan launch for Paulie's book. I also pay my respects to the traditional landowners, the Wurundjeri, the Kulin Nation, who was past, present, and emerging. Also want to acknowledge Jacob Rumbiak, who's dedicated his life to the independence of West Papua. Survived 10 years in Indonesian jails, several bullet wounds, and many common winters. Also acknowledge Louise, as you have called, who's tireless work, dedication to the cause knows no bounds. I've been in book publishing for the best part of 3 decades, and what keeps me interested is that every book is a window into another world, and Paulie opens the window very wide and allows us into his extraordinary life. When I first received the manuscript, I thought, another memoir from an aging rock star, but I read it, and there's a little bit of that in there, but I read it, and I was laughing out loud, I was shedding tears, and by the end of the book, I was believing in miracles. And as you heard, Tony, Paulie's brother, was murdered by the Indonesian military in Timor in 1975. And one of the main themes of the book is that Paulie harnesses that rage to become a punk rocker. But through the book you learn that he remains a punk rocker, but he becomes a punk rocker activist. And Paulie, perhaps just take us down the road a little bit, maybe your first gig, and how that led into the sort of life.
Well, first up, I'd like to say, but I want to thank Dave from the bottom of my heart, because when Peter and I finished the script, I sent it to all the different publishing companies, and the first reply I got back was, "Listen, mate, we're not interested. No one cares about East Timor or West Papua." And I went, I think I might have figured out the wrong thing here. But this guy took it on board, has been an amazing supporter, and give him a round of applause, please. I suppose the activism always started, well, when you name yourself after one of Australia's most notorious trade unions, who have got a bit of a political history, it just seemed a natural flow for us to become a bit of a political act, the painters and dockers. And not only did we play for the MUA in the day, but we also used to play on building sites here in the city. And there was a couple of years there when instead of getting a barrel and a stripper, you got a barrel of the painters and dockers, and that teaches you how to play, because if you're going on instead of a stripper, the guys want you to be entertaining. So we had to sort of learn that. But it just sort of seemed to progress, and meeting people like Kevin Bracken and Max Ward from the MUA, seeing their politics, so that had a big effect on me, and the activism just sort of rolled into it. And sure, I always had a thing about East Timor because my brother was killed up there, but I honestly have to say that it wasn't until I met, Gil Santos and Teresa Santos here that, they became my mates, and I sort of, that's why I got involved, because they were my friends, and I could never believe them, the way they would say, one day East Timor is going to be independent. And I think, these crew are crazy. That's never going to happen, ever, and but they just persisted, and East Timor's, all these years I've been bloody playing for a free East Timor, we've still got a bloody English queen, in this country. It pisses me off, when are we going to be in? But anyhow, also, with the West Papuan stuff, I'll never forget, because I worked at the Herald Sun as a music journalist as well, and I met this guy, 50 Cent, the big rapper, and he was telling me, and he wrote the press conference, "Oh, wow, 50 Cent, you're so heavy." He said, "Oh, you're not doing on my body." You know, and then a couple of weeks later, I was with Louise and Jacob, and I told him that story, and Jacob said, "Oh, I've got 4." You know, and I went, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got 4 bullet wounds." You know, and I said, "Well, how did that happen?" He said, "Well, I had to sleep down this creek all night, and the Indonesians were stepping over me, and then I heard his story, and he's you know, if I've got further into West Papua, because Jacob is such a lovely, wonderful fellow that just sort of inspired me to help out, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love the exchanges between you and Gil in the book. Gil is quoted as saying, "Paul is very passionate. He has a lot of heart for Timor. Whenever I asked him to do something for Timor, he never asked why. He really trusted me. We shared the same grief. We still didn't know where my father was buried. He was killed in 1975, and most of my uncles also. That's the ultimate price you pay for freedom." And then a few lines of you and the book, if I could just mention those. Gil is no doubt one of the best known Timorese musicians in the world. Over the years, I've seen so many people seek his help. He never says no. In rock and roll, there are so many who make promises and you never hear back from them. People think popular music these days is all about chart position and marketing your T-shirts. But Gil showed me there is still a part of that that remains revolutionary and life-changing. Yeah. And I guess you've sort of learned the power of song as well through your association.
Well, once again, I have to say, yeah, it was Gil who taught me that. And Gil said to me, "Paul, you seem to be taking all this anger out on yourself. You know, just chill out a bit." And he said, "You know, guitars are just as effective as guns when it comes to revolution." And I looked at him and went, "Wow, you know, that's an amazing thing to say." And he's proved me right, because we laugh because we've done gigs for the communists in the Jesuits here in Melbourne, the capitalists at the bank just up the road here, the anarchists in Sydney at one of their collectives. We have just played all around the world. In Brazil, we went over to did some gigs there, and as long as Gil's by my side, I can do anything. No worries, you know. He props me up, and plus he's a musician. You know, I'm just this wanker that sort of screams into a microphone. You know, he's the little brains. Yeah.
And you were there on Independence Day in Dili.
Yeah, wow, that was an incredible moment, you know, to go up there with, you know, Gil and all the other crew in the Dili All Stars, and to finally have their country independent after all these years, you know, was amazing. And actually, there was a big independence concert. I can remember the Portuguese had their own enclosure backstage, and it was full of like all the best alcohol and liquor and food, and they said, "Oh no, this is Portuguese," and it's the only time I've ever seen Gil lose it, you know. And he walked over and he said, "Listen, you know, we just got our independence. You think you're stopping us from coming in here? You know, this is our country." So we hit their tent, and I think me and Gil drank the whole the rider alone, you know. And I do have to really do a shout out to his mum, Berta Santos, who is sort of like my Terry's mum, who looked after me so many times I've gone to Timor. Girls going, look after Paulie, put him, just lie down there, Paulie, and you'll be right. She's fed me, and one of the greatest cooks on, and I love it dearly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Paul, you seem to have had just about as many lives as Jacob, and you've been given your last rites in hospital before you were. A liver was found to.
Well, people look at me and go, "That's bullshit, Paulie." But listen, I was in hospital to come and said, "See you later, alligator. You know, you're out of here." I woke up at the end of my bed. There was this little nun, you know, and I was so sick for 10 minutes. I was talking to her till I realised she was dark skinned. I said, "Where are you from, sister?" And she said, "Oh, this little country called Timor-Leste." And I said, "Is that some kind of a joke? You know, is this funniest home videos or something?" And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Oh, you know, my brother was one of the Ballabo Five, and I played a band here." And she said, "Not the Dili All Stars?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh, you guys got some food up to near my village once. Well, you know, why are you actually here? And I said, well, look, I need a new liver, but they've told me there's no way that I'm going to get one in time, or they can't find a match, you know. And she said, this little no, okay. And I thought, gee, it's a bit, you know, late to be drinking the alcohol, sister. You know? But I thought she was running and drinking the oxygen, you know. I thought, this little nun's off a rocker, you know. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I've got sisters in Timor, I'll ring them and we'll pray to the big fella, but if we get one, you've got to look after the kids up there. Is that a deal? And I sort of went, oh, yeah, okay, you know, never thinking anything further of it. And next morning, after waiting 18 months, this doctor comes running going, unbelievable, Paulie, perfect match for whoever has just came in. And, you know, I think it was 12 people worked for 22 hours putting it in. I can't even tell you what they did, you know, but I was awake, and then 3 days later, you know, they're sending me home from the Austin, which was unbelievable. Yeah.
And then you visited Timor again, and you made good of that promise.
Well, we went up there to make the Ballabo movie. Gil and I were hired as sort of musical consultants, which meant I hit the bar a lot, and Gil actually advised on musical consultancy, you know. But yeah, but before we left, our mate here in Melbourne, a guy called Abel Gutierrez, you might know, he said, oh, Paul, there's this little group of nuns up there, got nothing, just jump in and say good day to them, will you? Up to the lowest of the low. And I can remember there was a teacher at school that used to describe me as the lowest of the low. So I thought, oh, they're my people, you know. So me and Gil went and met these little nuns, and yeah, there was 5 nuns on one motor. So doing a campaign, and the Australians being the great loving people they are, we raised $80,000 to buy them a new, you know, transit van to help them get around all these up there. So yeah, and that's just gone on and on and on. The reason I'm a bit tired today and buggered is just that the 2 nuns in town, I can't keep up with them. No, I'm not joking. They're up at 4:30, like, you're right, Paulie? And I'm like, sister, go back to bed. You know, go and pray for me for a few hours. Oh, come on, we're up. Oh.
You always talk about them as being the real punks.
Oh, they are. They don't muck around, and I love the way they sort of, you know, it's the sisters who sisters do, not men, you know, and really remarkable. And they don't do possessions or for, you know, making money or buying big cars or houses and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so your activism in for East Timor has continued with the West Papua movement. There's obviously parallels to be drawn, both you know, European colonial powers and Indonesian military occupation. So what sort of lessons have you learned along the way?
Well, the main lessons, you know, I would say to the West Papuans is, you know, like what Teresa and Gil taught me, like never give up, you know, and you think something's impossible, and it happens, you know, and you know, I can remember meeting Jose Ramos Horta at Louise's place, and he was on the couch, and he was this funny little guy with a bow tie and this broken down suitcase. I said, who are you, mate? He said, oh, I'm East Timor's foreign minister, and one day we're going to be an independent country. And I thought, this guy's nutty, you know, there's no way that is going to happen. And sure enough, you know, look at him now, Mr. President. I love that, you know, and incredible. So yeah, to the West Papuans, I say don't give up. And I mean, I look around the room today, and it's amazing people are here supporting West Papua today. So thank you all for coming to support the West Papuans, because they need our help. And there's so much about West Papua I'm discovering all the time. Like what Jake, you were telling me the other day that your ancestors were all Jewish people from Spain. Like that flipped me out. You know, I didn't know there was that connection through there. And Yeah, it's an incredible place. But you yourself have spent time up in Papua New Guinea, so you know that sort of feel that.
Yeah, I lived in PNG for 11 years. Gets a lot of bad press, but you know, the people there are just incredibly generous, hospitable. It's just like a second home. So I do now feel a real natural empathy for West Papua. But Paulie, look, I really want to thank you for writing your book and sharing your story, and it really shows that through generosity of spirit, each of us as individuals can really make a change and make a difference.